Yo. Can I start? No? 2 more minutes. Oh, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, no gentlemen, ladies and ladies. How are you, my beautiful sisters, aunties, and nanas? Oh, you all look absolutely gorgeous in this crowd. Um, Let me introduce myself first and foremost. My name is Samara Jose. I'm a proud Gajala, Eastern Kuki-Yalanji, Darling Island woman, born and raised on the lands of the Gimoy, Wallaburra Yidinji people and Yurakanji country up in far north Queensland. So Murray was freezing when she got off that plane. I know it's been like the joke of this whole summit because anybody up north don't know how to buy clothes that actually keep us warm. They don't exist. I have the absolute and wonderful pleasure. You may have heard a little bit about DIG, Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good. I'm the chairperson and the co-founder of the organisation, and it's been an absolute honour and privilege to be in this space with you all. Yesterday we hosted the Youth Forum Day, and holy moly, the future is bright, right? Like, so many conversations about what we will no longer stand for. So many conversations about the strength of our women. And that is absolutely just echoed and amplified and demonstrated by this amazing panel that we have this afternoon. Before I introduce them, I'll just share with you their names, and then they're going to introduce themselves because they're strong, sovereign black women, and nobody speaks for them. The beautiful Miss Tonii Skeen, the amazing Samara Fernandez-Brown, and the absolutely brilliant Leah House. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies, please give them a big round of applause. So to kick off this afternoon's session, can you introduce yourself? And we did this yesterday. We have 3 favourite questions that we have at DIG. And what's your name? Who your mob? But the last one is always about what makes you deadly. So in your introductions, answer those 3 questions, and I have one more. I want to ask you, what are you working on, and how does that currently pave the way toward the future that you want to see? Take it away, Miss Tonii Skeen.
Y'all can hear me? Yeah. Mabu ngura ngura, good afternoon. Ngai niloal Tonii Wajayi Skeen, ngayu yaru jandu, yaru ngayu pad ngan yed jaba jaba yed nyigana yed ngaranyin yed bonabaye yed jaru, ngayu karimba ngayu Nagala Jandu. I'm from the Kimberley region, a whole number of different cultural and language groups across the Kimberley region, and my skin group is Garimba. What was the next question?
What are you currently working on? So, to put this in context, Murray likes to just skip ahead and not come back.
Yeah.
Obviously. The purpose of this session is about hearing young people's voices.
Yep.
And we always talk about young people have this, massive role to play, and we're often talked about and not necessarily always given a platform to share. But we also have this thing for, young people are the future, right? And young people have a vision for the future. So the question is what are you currently working on? And what is it, how is that paving the way forward?
Yeah, my life's responsibility has always been around succession planning. So, my life's work that I've been working on is around establishing a very clear governance structure for young people, so that there's this phrase of nothing about us without us. So young people, not only across the Kimberley region, but young people across Australia can advocate for themselves and by themselves. And by having a very clear governance structure in place allows young people to have their own voices to be heard, for their own voices to be heard, because where the problem lies, so does the solution. So the work that I've done my whole career of working in the last 10 years is around creating those processes and structures in place for young people to have their voices, that regardless of your socioeconomic background or the location that you are from, that your voice is heard. And that work is so important because we speak about succession planning and we hear a lot of our elders and leaders talk about young people are the leaders of tomorrow. And so, the question is that, what are we all doing today for us to be that leader of tomorrow? And that's a part of the important work that I've had such privilege to lead and design.
Yeah, thank you, Tonii. That's powerful. I think such a big conversation, and one that's already happened today is this conversation around succession planning. And I think good to hear some workers things. And if you ever have any, need some help, some little young people, go and down for Tonii. Samara, my namesake. Hey, if your name is Samara, you must be deadly. Just saying. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing and where is it taking you? What's happening?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I just wanted to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also want to send the acknowledgement out to all your different mobs that are in the room today, and obviously I can't do anything without acknowledging my mob. I'm a very proud Warlpiri woman, and my family are from the remote communities of Yuendumu, Lajamano, Nyidby and Wallara in Central Australia, stretching up to the Northern Territory. And obviously we're here to acknowledge women, and I can't be here without all of the strong women that I have in my life that paved the way for me. The work that I do at the moment is with Black deaths in custody. I was sort of thrust into this space because I've unfortunately had a family member who's passed away, who was taken from us in 2019. And so it's an unexpected space to be in, but I sort of acknowledge that it is my position in my community and family to be in, to sort of be that spokesperson. And being in this space has moved me to now start working for the Dajua Foundation, which was founded by April Watson due to her mum's passing, Auntie Tanya Day in Victoria. It's a foundation that supports families that have experienced a Black death in custody and supports those families in navigating the space. But of course, it's always around what family wants, because different families want different things, and we're here to just facilitate that space and nurture and care for family best we can. But in terms of the work and sort of my goals in it is obviously first and foremost to stop black deaths in custody. And further, I think, like we've spoken about, to change the lens from this deficit-based lens and to looking towards a brighter future where we can focus more on those positive aspects around, you know, relationship building, skill building, generational wealth, and sort of anything along that spec.
Yeah, powerful. And so relevant in this space that, you know, a lot of young people are put into positions, you know. Our community, our leaders, our elders tap us on the shoulder. You know, and a lot of that is where we're thrust into these positions where we have to stand up. And very much so what you've done in leading and supporting your family. Sis, thank you very much. Leah, who are you, sis? Who are you?
My name is Leah. I'm Leah House. I'm a Tonii Wajayi woman. I live and work and raise my sons here on my ancestors' country, and I acknowledge that it's a privilege to be able to have that connection to my country, because we do have a lot of mob across the continent that were that was denied and they were taken from their country. I guess everything I do comes from my own lived experiences. So I was raised by a single parent with substance abuse issues. I'm a survivor of DV and sexual assault. And with that lived experience, I entered the community sector, and I work at the ACT Human Rights Commission with victims of crime. So I work with First Nations men, women and children that have been impacted by crime. And it's a space I'm really passionate about. I guess coming with that lived experience, it's a bit of a balancing act as well, knowing your triggers. But also through that, I also am on the working group for the Aboriginal 10 Embassy, and that's a space I'm really passionate about as well. I'm really passionate about taking up space, physical space. I think we talked about it yesterday, what makes us deadly, and something for me I said was that I'm brave because I do take up space in a lot of spaces that aren't designed for us, and I think I'm deadly because of that. And I also am the Vice President of the Black People's Union. It's a revolutionary organisation that we believe that as sovereign people we have the right to manage our political and our social and economic affairs as we see fit. We, at the union, we work to uphold our sovereignty over our lands and waters, and to improve and protect the conditions and the rights of both employed and unemployed mob across the country, within the workforce, within community, and while incarcerated within the prison system.
Powerful work. I think we've talked a lot about, over the last day and a half, about the diverse viewpoints and the recognition that we need so many different kinds of agitators and change makers in this space to do different kinds of things, right? Ultimately, it is about the betterment of our people, and the role that young people play in that space of agitation is key and vital in continuing on that fight. You know, we talk about generational change. It's generational. Women like you who've drawn down from your elders, your aunties, to be able to lead this way and lead the work. I want to throw to you, Tonii, first for this first question. From your perspective and experience, what is the unique role of young people in shaping what the future actually looks like?
It's so incredible that, if you look at the statistics of young people, we are the largest growing population of young Aboriginal people, across all of our communities. And I think what's been the missing link into all of the work that's been going on is allowing young people to have a seat at that table, because the uniqueness of what we bring as young people is we bring our truth, we bring our reality, we are living the issues that society place on us. And the most unique thing that we can do is utilize and allow young people to have those seats at the table to talk about the things that matter and that are important to them. In particular, drawing back to the Kimberley Regional, we have had the 2 coronal inquiries which looked into the deaths of young people in the Kimberley who died by suicide, is that there were a number of recommendations that came out of that, and there was a very monumental moment for myself in my leadership journey in the Kimberley, and it was when back in 2016 there was a number of leaders from across the nation that met in Broome, and they came together to talk about the crisis of young people who were dying in the Kimberley. And with all due respect to every leader that was around the table, there was no young person in that room. And then so with my little agitating way, I fit myself into that room, and I was waiting for the right moment to be able to speak. And I said exactly that. I said that I acknowledged everybody and respect everybody that was in that room. And they spoke about the reasons why our young people were dying, what was happening, the money that needed to be invested. But what was missing was, the young people that were in that room. And so Nigel Scullion was the minister at that time. And so, I said, well, where are the young people? I said, young people are living, breathing, and feeling this way. So it's up to the young people to talk about what's happening to them, what's happening to their peers, and how do we design, and how do we ensure that suicide no longer becomes, an option or a choice for us as young people. And then what came out of that was funding being committed to hold the first ever gathering of Kimberley Aboriginal young people to talk exactly about that. And it was very strategic in the way that we met and we sat, because what we didn't want was another report on another shelf, of all the reports that have been sitting on these shelves. And what was really important was then we didn't even know as young people what a governance structure was or how do we have our voice to be heard. But what we started to do back then was draw up, well, how do we as young people speak for ourselves, but not only when the spotlight comes to us when there's a deficit in our community. How do we design the minimum standards of engagement when government come? When it comes to collaboration or co-design, when it comes to policy, how do you ensure that young people are sitting there and that are designing everything that's for them? Because, not after the fact, but here and now. And that's, the most important bit of work that is being done. And the most beautiful thing about this is that this can be replicated elsewhere, which is so exciting.
It's really interesting. We talked a little bit yesterday about the idea and the role specifically of a young person when they have a seat at the table, right? We talked a little bit about it's a dual role, in one that they have to listen and they have to learn. We talk about governance structures and we've got to learn about those things, and you start a corporation or whatever it is and you don't know what that means. It's language that's foreign in the start, right? But there's also that other role around knowing what you want and the future, and that you actually are shaping the future as is being built. Do you agree? Or
Yes, and in the Kimberley region, we are guided by Kimberley cultural governance structure, and if anybody got the opportunity to sit down with the Kalak old woman who spoke about the work that they're doing, and what just reminded me just again is the number one recommendation for their outcomes was around old people and young people working together, and that was their number one recommendation and priority which came out of that, which is so important because organically our old people are sitting with us and around us in the Kimberley region. But just to re-go over that report and see that was a reminder again to how we, the work that we're doing and the importance of culture, because when we talk about governance structures and systems is that it's going back to basic. It's not, very philosophical. It's going back to, what's worked before and how do we embed those things again to go forward.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have far out. Gee whiz. Blimey Charlies. Sisters, nanas, aunties. I like that one. That's a good one. On your app, we'll take 20 minutes before the end of the session and we'll take some questions for these young people. So if you go into the app, you can put your question in there and we'll be answering questions at the end of this session through the app. They'll pop up on my screen because we're deadly like that. Technology babies. Leah, you're talking a lot about the work that you're currently doing now and where it's heading. What does the future actually look like? And what needs to happen now in order to be able to achieve that future?
Oh, God.
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
It's a big question, right?
I think I envision the future with black bodies in decision-making positions, I guess is the easiest way to summarize it. That's one of the biggest barriers, I think, in my community, and I can really only speak for Canberra in my community, but there is a lot of funding for spaces, but a lot of it goes to non-Indigenous organisations, and it's non-Indigenous people making decisions for my community. And that's one of the most challenging conversations to unpack with people that probably are coming with good intentions. But I envision the future with a generation, with my current generation, a little bit more connected and a little bit more nurturing of each other.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the challenging parts. I know we already talked about it the other day, but it's difficult, I think, as a young person to hold space at the table when you are given that opportunity to sit at a table, if you're at the table with older fellas that don't allow you room to grow and don't encourage you to grow and uplift you and empower you to grow. And I think for a lot of younger mob, it can be very intimidating to hold space at tables because, some of them older ones, like we are here on the backs of legends, on the shoulders of some of the greatest mob that we are so privileged to come from. I look at my elders that I'm so privileged to be able to spend time with, and they inspire me. And I just hope that when I get to their age, we're going to have younger mobs saying the same thing about our generation.
I think it's been a really interesting conversation, one that's popped up a couple of times for us, right? Around the role, what we inherit as young people, right? The strength, the awesomeness, the absolute brilliance, innovation from our elders and our old people who have had so much put up against them, so many barriers. But we also talk a little bit about those challenges, the things that we inherit that aren't necessarily always good, the infighting, the tearing down of each other. And what has come through, and I think, you hit this nail on the head, that young people also want something different around that in our future. We want to be able to work collaboratively together. We want a different future where we don't do that. We don't inherit old bullshit. Hey, can I say that? Good ways. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Me.
I know there's division in almost every... You're not going to find many communities across this continent without division. I think as long as we are divided and bickering amongst ourselves, I think that works to the government's advantage because we're too distracted fighting amongst ourselves. And I think that sometimes it feels like that's how they want us to be because as long as we're not united and working together, we're weak. But when we work together, when we come together and mobilise, and that's something I'm always... I'm not surprised by it. Like every time my community shows up, when we got a rally, when we got something going on, the way our power to mobilise, there's so much strength in that. It's so powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you, sis. Samara, because you're deadly, You got the hard question.
No.
There are amazing, strong black women and leaders and elders in this room who are all looking at you right now. What is their role in empowering young people to exercise their agency? Right? Our elders, our leaders who have seats at the table, who have fought hard for those seats at the table, who design, deliver, do all those things. What is their role in making space? What is their role in empowering young people? What does it look like?
I think just speaking more off of my experience, particularly with the murder trial and the coronial inquest for my cousin, how my elders have created space for me is given me the knowledge that I need, given me time to ask questions, but then also trusted me with sort of my expertise, I suppose, in the sense of, you know, we've spoken and had a joke about how elders, they don't really like media or social media, for instance, and so having to teach, you know, my grandmothers and grandfathers and elders in community that we live in a generation where we can weaponise social media for our advantage, how we can use it to, you know, really drive our points across and put our narratives out there. We no longer need to accept the stereotypes that have been placed on us from these media aspects. We can take control. And so they have given me the opportunity to do that for us through the murder trial for Wajayi Walker, my cousin. There was so much negative media through the murder trial because there was a lot of you know, gag orders. We couldn't talk about a lot of things, and so we had to adhere to those things. But coming into the inquest, it was my biggest goal is to make sure we were sharing our truth and our story, and, you know, humanising Wajayi and speaking about him as a loved one, as a community member, and as someone who's missed. And I think for my family and community, it was really hard to be vulnerable and to share our pain and our struggle, but they trusted me with that. And I think it's just ensuring that you're trusting your young people and you're respecting them as much as they respect you also. And when you have a seat at the table, always ensuring that you're saving a seat for the young people coming through and knowing when it's time for you to stand up, you're going to let them sit down.
Powerful. Powerful. Sisters, I want to ask you all the same question. What are the lessons that you have learned as a young woman? What are the big questions and challenges that you have come across? So in all your battles, in all your challenges, and all the things that you've come up against, what's the lesson that you've learned from that?
To be myself authentically, and don't minimise myself to make other spaces comfortable and other people comfortable. I don't need to dull myself or minimise myself. I know I'm sitting here kind of a bit reserved and my voice is shaking a bit, but just, not being scared to be yourself is what I've learned, because if you're just trying to please everyone else, you're just doing yourself a disservice.
Absolutely. Totally. Loud and proud. Samara?
I think having a goal, knowing what you're fighting for and knowing what it is you're aiming for, because if you don't have that, you're not moving anywhere, or you're moving a whole bunch of nowhere. So having that clear goal, knowing what this future you want looks like, what it feels like, and then being able to sort of, take inspiration and take knowledge for those who are already on that pathway. And, you know, like looking at different mob that can support you along the way. Like, I think as women and as black women, we do so much work in our communities, in our families, and sometimes we think we have to do it alone. But understanding that, you know, we've got so much people that are supporting us, but just knowing where we want to give. And just on that, I just want to give a special shout out to Anya Pabucha, who's been on this journey with me along the whole way, and I could not have done it without her.
Powerful. Thank you, sis.
Knowing who I am, where I come from, and what I'm doing in life, so knowing my own why and not letting anybody else define what that is or how I do it. I've often been told that I'm too passionate, but I think, you know, as I would share with everybody here in this room, it's not a matter of being too passionate or not, it's a matter of life and death for us. And it's what we do, and it's our innate responsibility. We wake up every day and we do this because it's a responsibility that we have. And so for me, it's around finding your tribe and loving them hard, knowing that there are always people that are standing with you. And there are going to be times where it is alone. But for me, it's been around being my own best friend and doing what needs to be done and knowing that it's right because of hearing your Leah, that you know that it's, you know, a very right thing to do. But I'm a very process-driven person, so I believe that if we follow the right process, that the outcomes will come. But knowing who you are, where you come from, and what you're about, and not letting anybody else decide or define what that is.
Absolutely powerful. Ladies and sisters and aunties and nanas, such power in the words that they have shared so far. We're going to start to take some questions from the crowd. Our first question is from Chelsea. Feeling empowered and having the confidence to take up space is important. But once we have that, what are the skills that you think are important to negotiate change as a young person with governments or our current decision makers to ensure effective reform? Who want to take it? Paper, scissors, rock? Or
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it's particularly a skill, but I think you need to be relentless in where you want to get to. Even for a lot of the things we're aiming for, they haven't been done before, or we're fighting against an uphill battle. You know, we've got governments and systems that are there to oppress us and to not allow us to get where we want to. So I think it's just being relentless in that goal, in that quest to get where you want to. In my case, it's obviously to stop black deaths in custody, and that's a hard battle. It's, you know, we've had no accountability in that space. And I think for us, it's just being relentless, but like Sis was saying, in our truth and in who we are as individuals, and creating, not even creating, but making sure we're putting the narrative that we are out there. But for me, I think it's just, in my fight personally and in my community's fight, it's being relentless on what we want and the change we want, but doing it with your whole heart, with yourself, you know, like making sure that that you're not bending for anybody else, that you're talking about things that you want to talk about, that you're getting those points across, and that you're just asking for those changes.
Thank you, sis. Be relentless. Anyone else?
I think one of the most important things that we need to learn how to do is, you know, understand what's been done before, so we're not reinventing the cycle. And it's really important that, you know, often we do complain about government and about these structures and systems that are in place, but it's really important that a lot of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women have worked very senior in these positions and in these roles and in these systems. So I think it's really important in understanding, you know, how do we navigate through that, and what are the skills that we do need. So it's around then how are we providing opportunities for our young people, not at administration level? How do we have our next CEOs and our next policy makers, and our next, people in political positions, but it's aiming actually high, aiming for the stars around, no matter who you are and where you come from, whatever you choose to do, you will become. And so it's around learning around, well, what are the roles that do we need in place to, let's not bang on the door and say, let's have more money for funding for a program. How do we have our own Indigenous women around designing what these policies look like? And so I think that's what we need to do, is we need to aim really big in to say that those are the positions that we want, and these are the women that we will have who will then fill those positions to ensure that we have effective reform here in our country.
Solid.
I was going to say the same thing, but slightly different, not as in-depth. God, you talk good. I was just going to say, knowing our history, I think it is a skill, and I think there's a lot of power in knowing our history. As a young person, there's a lot of power in it. If you understand where our elders have come from and what's being done, what's happened, throughout the decades, when we can look back at, the 60s, the referendum back then, or through up to the 90s, and the work people like Auntie Isabel Coe did that at the embassy, and then the years since with constitutional recognition and everything that's happened throughout the decades. If you can take the time and be patient and understand our history in its entirety, which I'm still in the process of doing, and I can be a little bit biased because I do spend a lot of time with some of them old radical blackfellas, because it's just the space I was raised in. But understanding that history is powerful, and that's a skill, because a lot of mob don't. My earring just fell out. No one wants to sit there and take the time to understand where we've come from. It can be a little bit draining, because you're going to see a lot of failures. You're going to see where a lot of things went wrong, and you're going to see a lot of spaces where our mob were taken advantage of and their trust was misused. So you've got to have thick skin to sit down and understand that history. Understanding our history so you're not repeating those same mistakes, that's a skill, because when you do sit at that table with them non-Indigenous organisations and with government, and you can see behaviours being repeated that them older fellas have already lived through, they've been there, done that. Yep. When you got an understanding of that, that's powerful, and that's a skill.
Yeah, we've all had, I'm sure, those experiences where we're having those yarns and debriefing with our elders, and they say, "Bub, that shit's still happening."
Yeah.
What the hell, Our next question is from Azure. Our future is in no doubt in good hands. What can we do to support you, or what do you need in order to reach your goals?
I'd like to throw that question back to everybody, that it's, if you guys can go and have those conversations with the young people where you guys are from, around what do they need and how can you support them? Because it's all good and well if I can talk about what I need, but my old people are sitting right there and they know exactly, the support that they can give me. But I challenge everybody that when we leave this gathering, that you go and do exactly that. We are all in positions to sit down and have these conversations with young people around what are the support that you need, what can I do, or if not, if I can't do that, what support do you need, and how can I go and find that support so I can then support you to reach your goals. So I really would like to challenge you guys all to go back and speak to your own young people in your own communities and towns around what are the support that do those young people need for them to make the changes within their own communities.
Powerful. Anyone else? Samara, different perspective?
Yeah, sure. So with the support that we need, that changes from what we're doing in our campaigns. So at the moment, we've still got 2 weeks left of my cousin's coronial inquest. And after that, we'll start rigorously campaigning for the different things we'll be asking for. And so when those recommendations and when our campaigning begins, I think I'll just, want everybody to amplify our voices what we're asking for. There's simple ways you can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on Facebook at Justice for Walker, and just amplify our voices. And you could brainstorm.
How do they amplify if they don't have Instagram or Facebook? Asking for the aunties and the nanas in the room?
Yeah, of course. It's, you know, like you've got the internet, so there's many articles, there's many interviews that we have, and so it's listening to what we're talking about, what we want, and then sort of communicating that in any conversations you're having, rather than thinking about what you think is best or what we could do and putting that out there. Just reiterate what we're already asking for, what we're already thinking about, because what works in your community might not work in ours, and vice versa. And so just amplifying our voices directly. And then, you know, like supporting if we need petitions signed eventually, if there's GoFundMes, things like that that are really tangible. But I think also just, if you do have fantastic ideas, I'm always open to listening to them. So getting in contact with me either on Instagram or my email address, and, you know, facilitating those spaces for conversation. And yeah, like maybe if you are an elder, think about where you were at when you were 25 and what you could have benefited from, what support you would have loved to have at that time, and maybe just offering it to some young people in these spaces.
Beautiful. Do we have any more questions on our app? Transition. What is something you wish you were told when you were younger by somebody older? Be that a mother, an auntie, or a sister. Go, Leah. Drop the mic. Bong. From Hannah. Hannah, great question.
I don't know. What's something I wish I was told? I don't know.
Imagine yourself as like a little fresh 18-year-old. Oh.
I had 2 kids then.
Oh, well.
Dang. I had to grow up very fast at a very young age, because boys. I do wish I slowed down a little bit. I wish I wasn't in such a rush to grow up. That would be, if I could go back to my 18-year-old self, I wish I was a kid a little bit longer. Not that I was a kid at that age, and I think unfortunately, in my community, a lot of my generation did grow up quite fast, and we do kind of trauma bond over our own collective trauma, because we grew up in those little suburbs like Narrabundah and that. But yeah, I wish I didn't want to rush to grow up so fast, is what I would tell my 18-year-old self, because it doesn't get easier.
No, it gets harder.
It does get harder.
Yes.
But you know what? You find some good, solid people along the way that have your back. And when you got a good little support network around you, you're unstoppable.
Totally.
So allow space for that. Like, stop thinking you got it all on your own. Allow people in and build a good support network around you, because once you got good supports and a good network and you're strengthening your community, like, that's powerful.
Totally. Tonii?
I've always done my own thing anyways. Yeah, I've always done what I thought was true or right to do. But one of the things that just made me quickly reflect on is that one of the things that my mum taught me was to always be grateful. And so we were always grateful. And then I said, you know, what if I want to be grateful for bigger and better things? And she said, well, then you go and speak to that person who's done it before, because they'll then show you what to do. And so I'm very grateful to be able to be shared and told that, like, if you want something, go and get it. You know, if you want to know how to do it, ask, or just do it anyways. Because then, you know, like the conversation was, well, what if I want to be grateful and I want to own my own house and not put my name down for a Homes West house? And she said, well, you go and speak to somebody who's bought the house before, because they'll be able to show you how to do it. And that's exactly what I did, and that is exactly what I do. So I don't think, I wish that if somebody would have told me something different, because I always, did whatever I wanted to do. But in exactly that is that I think we need it to be reminded that it's been done before, whatever the challenges that we face in life. But to reach out for that support, because it's been done before. Yeah.
Absolutely. Samara?
I think it's something we've already spoken about throughout the conference, but I think something that I wish I was told when I was younger was to spend more time with your old people and to sit, to listen and to learn. I'm very grateful because, you know, with being Warlpiri, we do have our language and we do have our traditions and our culture. But at the same time, when you're young, you don't realise how important those things are. You take that for granted because you think that everybody has it. You think that it's going to be there forever. So for me, I think I wish I'd spent more time just sitting and listening and learning and really prioritising culture. I'm, again, very lucky because I do understand Warlpiri and I do speak it, but at the same time, there's always things that you can learn, right? And with Warlpiri, even learning in recent years, you know, like there are certain Warlpiri words that don't exist now because they might just come up around ceremony time, or they might just come up around sorrow business time, and they're not spoken about a lot, so you can lose those things. So I think just really sitting in culture and prioritising that, because I think growing up in this Western society, we're almost told to prioritise them, to prioritise what, you know, white people tell you is important and to prioritise fitting in. But I think when I was younger, I would have really benefited from hearing Samara, pay attention to your culture more, prioritise that, because I think, as we all know, when you're strong in culture and language and customs and whatnot, you just feel stronger in yourself and in your spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. You can walk into any system and smash it down.
I was just going to say, I love that so much. Because I wish I spent that time with a little bit, instead of rushing trying to big note and think you're all grown up. I wish I didn't do that. But something I wish I did hear was that you're going to make mistakes. And I think when you are younger, working in the sector, you're going to make a mistake. It's inevitable. You're going to mess up. And sometimes it can make you trip a bit, and it's really hard to come out of that. And I think I wish I wasn't told it's okay, you're going to make mistakes. They're inevitable. But how you pick yourself up after those mistakes and move forward, that's what matters. And to not shy away from black critique, because it's such a privilege to receive black critique, being pulled up by our elders and aunties and our uncles like that. Being pulled up by our mob is a privilege, and we shouldn't shy away from it. That black critique is powerful, and we should embrace it.
We've all been growled by aunties, I'm pretty sure. Main one, I totally understand what that means. Because Maury likes to move her mouth before her brain does. Which leads into, I think this is a really beautiful question, thanks you, Billy Jade, one of the deadly young people. How can we work towards latitudinal love, lateral love, and move away from lateral violence? How do we bring sisters up? It's a big one.
I think it's quite plain and simple, just role modelling it. If you are role modelling, loving somebody, caring for somebody, being there for somebody, they then feel that. And it's just around going back to the basics and being exactly that. Be who you were when you were younger. I think we've all experienced lateral violence, but you shut that down with lateral love. and you role model the love that you need to give. And then that will be then the norm.
Absolutely.
Love that. Love you, my sister.
Love you too.
Samara.
I think as well, moving away from lateral violence into lateral love is just, I think, with acceptance and with your truth, right? I think a lot of mobs sometimes think they have got to be blacker or they need to know this thing the most to be black. But I think it's understanding where you're at in your life and understanding that who you are is going to be beneficial for somebody else, particularly if they're like you. So understanding who you're at. If you don't know your language, if you grew away off country, that's okay. Because there's so many other people that are going to benefit from your story. You don't have to be like somebody who grew up on country, who grew up in their language, because other people are going to benefit from them. Understanding that you don't have to be anything or anyone other than who you are, and understanding what journey you're on and where you're moving towards. I think we get caught up, you know, we see it with art sometimes. Some mob, they didn't grow up with their art, so then they copy another mob and think that that attributes to Aboriginal art, but it doesn't. And it's okay if you didn't learn it. Go back, if you can, to your mob and learn it. Or just understand where you're at right now. You don't have to be anybody else to be important. You're very important already in who you are.
I love that. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
I think understanding what lateral violence is really key to that question, because as I was saying with black critique, I think it's really important to be able to be pulled up by a mob. So understanding what is and what isn't lateral violence is really important as well within that discourse. But lateral love, I'm all for it. I think I work with people when they're in some of their most vulnerable states. I take them and I answer the phone calls like in the middle of the night with mob like crying. They mucked up, they started using again. It's all good, I'm safe. I'm a safe person and I project, I think exactly what you was talking about, that role modeling behaviour, exactly what I needed when I was younger, and understanding that no one's perfect, you're going to make mistakes. You just got to be patient with each other, patient with yourself. Because that patient love is the most powerful love in the world. That soft, patient love.
Unconditional. That unconditional love. I'm here even if you're an idiot. That love. Right? Beautiful. Ladies and sisters and aunties and nanas, our final question for our amazing panellists is, in 20 years' time, what are we, 2043? 2043. Gee, I'll be 50. Holy! That's old. Nah, gammon. It's not old.
He's out here. You want to back up?
Yeah, right. I gotta see. Mouth moves faster than brain. Okay. In 20 years' time, what will you have done to have changed the future? Big question. Big question. What will you have done?
I know, well, for in the Kimberley region that every young person, no matter their socioeconomic background or where they're from, that they will have the opportunity to be the change that they want to see in their own community and in their own right. And that young people will determine what success and what leadership and what their destiny looks like on their own terms.
Powerful. Yes.
I think to add on to that, something that I've been craving and I think is really important is to accomplish some level of generational wealth and create hubs within our communities that don't need saving from outside sources, because our communities have everything we need. We have so much knowledge, so much power, but we're in so many ways not given the opportunity to really self-govern. And so just as an example, Yundamu, for instance, it's 3-4 hours away from Alice Springs. So just to get a plumber could take anywhere from a week to months because you're paying a fee which is like $1,000 before the plumber does anything in your community. Who's stopping us from having plumbers in our communities, from having electricians in our communities, and having everybody in our community have a role to help an ecosystem that isn't governed off of outside support and saving? So I think for me it's creating those ecosystems of, you know, self-governance, but also to move away from deficit-based goals and approaches and to look towards the future in a way where healing and being healed is the norm. And it's no longer about healing, but more so about maintaining our well-being. We're all going to go through grief, we're all going to go through stress, but having the toolkit and having the power to be able to move through that with grace and understanding that they're going to just be pitfalls, but not states of existence anymore.
Do we have time?
Don't worry about the timer. Go.
I don't know. In 20 years' time, I guess it's not as big as you fellas, but I will hopefully have raised 2 sons that are decent human beings and release them into the world.
Big. That is big, sister.
And also, in 20 years' time, I know I'll be able to look back and know that I was a part of spaces that didn't settle for anything less than what we deserve.
Yes. Solid.
Samara, can I just add as well?
Yeah, Samara went.
Sorry, I
go for
think
it.
like just as like tangible goals, I think in 20 years' time, we need to ensure that there are no more youth prisons. I think personally.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And to move away from, you know, those spaces of incarceration and looking towards preventative measures that are nurturing for our mob.
Beautiful. Thank you, sister. Well, what
before
with...
you end
oh,
off.
go on, they're going, she's going. No.
And in final, that in 20 years' time, Black excellence will be celebrated by all and for us.
Yes, 100%. Such wisdom at such a young age, right? This ability to be able to learn intergenerationally, nanas, aunties, sisters. This is the power of young people, and how when we include young people in these conversations, we give them a seat at the table, they have an ability to shape something or spark a thought, or sometimes, you know, just challenge the way that we think, because we're going to say things when our brain isn't working because it's our truth, right? We say things that are unfiltered, unrestricted, unrestrained, because we got to, and it just happens. I want to end on this, and it's something I want to teach you. It's something we do at Didge, and it's just about acknowledging that there is excellence. And we do this with little people and kids, so this is, bear with us. I know you're nanas and aunties and sisters and too old for all this kind of business, but you're going to do it anyways because I don't care. It's what we call positive recognition, right? It's recognizing when individuals and collectives do something amazing. We have to visibly show it. And it's teaching and rewiring the brain to do this. So instead of applauding, we're going to teach you positive recognition, and it goes like this. Hey! Right? And where you point your fingers is where you're pointing that recognition, that good energy, and you're sending love their way, right? So we'll do it slow, we'll do it together. You go slap, slap, clap, clap, click, click, then point. Hey! And you know, you can do that proper hey with that body roll too one time. Love it. Got to. Sisters, ladies, aunties, one more time to our amazing panel. Yes. Show them some positive recognition. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hey, you're flat too deadly. Thank you very much for having us.
All right, here we are on the home stretch, but how good was that? Amazing. I'm sure that we'll hear much more from our young people as the summit continues, but thank you so much for all of those pearls of wisdom that you shared, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to listen to that perspective. Okay, turn to the person next to you. How are you travelling? Let's find out. We've only got a very short period of time left. Do I need to do the energy question? All right, I'm starting over here. Come on. I'm going to start over here. How are we going? There we go. Over here. Half your mob was asleep. Over here. All right. Keep it going. We've got a few things just to get through, and then we're on to the canapes and the socialising. Of course, one of the other things that we've seen already is a couple of video messages, and in particular, I want to share with you now the video message from Reem Al-Salem, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, its causes and consequences, and she wants to share this message with the summit today.
Girls of First Nations participating in the Wiyi Yani U Thangani Summit. Dear Mrs. June Oscar, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, members of the Australian Human Rights Commission and other participants in this meeting. It's both a pleasure and a privilege to be able to address you today, and I would like to sincerely congratulate you on this extraordinary achievement of holding this kind of summit for the first time. If I have any regrets, it's my inability to share with you this historic day in person, not only because of its implications for First Nations in Australia and for Australia itself, but also because of the significance of the process that you have put in place to finalize and adopt the framework for action, as well as set up an institute to monitor and implement it. The process has clearly centered the voices and participation of First Nation women and girls, and the process has remained true to their vision, beliefs, and priorities of First Nations people, and the value of that approach is clearly reflected in the thematic areas that have been identified and which are not only individual, but also have a strong collective dimension. Together, these demonstrate the way in which gender justice intersects with other rights and the way it is interwoven with a respectful and loving relationship with Mother Earth and with nature. The resulting framework, therefore, is a bold initiative that has tried to address the issues of structural inequalities that cause the systematic and historic violence against First Nation women and girls, making a conscious decision not to leave them or anyone else behind, but to put them front and center in all processes. In many ways, if carried through and if complemented with a robust implementation, monitoring, and evaluation mechanism, your process is an embodiment of the recommendations that this mandate has made in the report to the Human Rights Council last year on how to prevent and respond to violence against Indigenous women and girls, but also of the recommendation 39 of the Committee of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women on the rights of Indigenous women and girls. It really shows that when there is a political way, transformative processes and futures are possible. As you finalize and adopt the implementation framework, I call on the government and non-government stakeholders that are engaging with you, First Nation women and girls, to engage with you with commitments, respect, authenticity, and with an understanding and appreciation of the responsibility that they carry through this engagement. Only then can we hope for a prosperous future for Australian communities, for Australian women and girls, including First Nation women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and I do want to acknowledge the time that it took to coordinate all of those video messages, and I'm sure that June will respond accordingly to them to thank them very much for the contribution thus far. Okay, here we are now, the very last thing, or the formal thing on the program today, as I want to acknowledge that many people have travelled long distances to be here, and I mentioned this morning that we have a group of sisters who have travelled for almost 2 days to be here, and I think it is absolutely fitting that A, they're really tired, but their energy is next level, and they are the most appropriate way for us to close out today's formal part of the program. Before I ask them to join, I want to just say two points of housekeeping. That following straight on from this, IBA will be providing canapes out in the foyer, and so you can make your way, once the dances have finished, that will be the conclusion, and you can make your way through. And the other thing is just to remind you that things are changing a little bit on the program, so the app is the best way that you will find out the most up-to-date information, so make sure that you continue to do that. I want you now to, a big round of applause, get up, stand up, do whatever you need to do to welcome our deadly sisters, the Saibai Island Dance Group. Deadly, keep it going. Big effort. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the formalities of the program today. Can I also just make a quick reminder that there is the screening of Jakama at 6 p.m. in this room as well. So enjoy your evening, everybody. Get rest because there's another big day coming.